Ever wished Little Red Riding Hood could go full-on werewolf, like while she's battling alongside the Monkey King?
Uh-huh. Now that you mention it.
Right. Well, get ready to live that dream because Ravenswatch, the action RPG that's all about those dark fairy tales and roguelike thrills, just hit 1.0.
Yeah, it's wild how they take those classic stories we all kind of think we know and just inject them with this, like, potent mix of dark humor and, gotta be honest, some seriously satisfying combat.
It's like bedtime stories went off the rails. Totally rogue. And lucky for you, we've been combing through reviews, gameplay footage, even those spicy Steam forum debates, all to bring you the ultimate Ravenswatch breakdown. So is it worth your time, your gaming budget? Let's dive in.
Okay, so, at its core, right, Raven's Watch is all about this tight gameplay loop. You've got 3 in-game days and nights to power up your chosen hero.
3 days and nights, huh? That sounds kind of like a weekend, but with more monsters.
Pretty much. Picture this. Procedurally generated maps, totally teeming with enemies, quests to conquer.
Oh, so you're not just like vibing in a magical meta for 3 days straight.
Haha, definitely not. All of this builds up to this showdown with, like, a big bad boss at the end of each cycle.
Okay, that sounds intense, but also kind of my ideal Tuesday night, not gonna lie. But hold on, what happens when you inevitably, like, faceplant against some mythical beastie? I'm assuming it's not game over after one miscalculated dodge.
Ah, you see, that's where the whole roguelike thing really shines. Death. It's not the end in Raven's Watch. Think of it more as a learning
A
experience.
learning experience that probably involves respawning with slightly less loot than you had before.
Uh-huh, maybe. But hey, you've got this system of extra lives, they call them Raven Feathers, to help you push your limits, figure out enemy patterns.
Yeah.
Each attempt, even the messy ones, they get you closer to that sweet, sweet victory.
So it's like you're always chasing that high score, but instead of just bragging rights, you get to, like, live to fight another monstrous chicken or whatever kind of crazy creatures lurk in Ravenswatch.
Precisely. And the real beauty of it, I think, is in their character roster. 9 playable characters, each one a unique spin on these classic fairy tale figures.
Yeah. We're talking a Pied Piper who can summon, like, a literal army of rats. That's got to be a fun mechanic. Or a Geppetto who's basically a walking explosives expert.
Oh yeah, thanks to his puppet pals, they went all out with those character designs.
It's wonderfully unhinged. But are those just aesthetic choices, or do those characters actually play differently too?
Oh, they totally play differently. Each one has their own set of unique abilities, And they've got these branching talent trees, so you've got a surprising amount of build diversity.
So let me guess, you're more of a go full werewolf with scarlet kind of player.
Guilty as charged. What about you?
Honestly, I think I'm leaning towards the Snow Queen. Gotta love that whole freeze everything in sight approach to problem solving.
Solid choice.
Yeah.
And that's just scratching the surface. We haven't even touched upon, like, those darkly humorous side quests.
Ooh, okay, give me an example. What kind of darkly humorous are we talking about here?
All right, so there's one where if you neglect to help the 3 little pigs, their houses get absolutely demolished by monsters.
Okay, that's hilarious. And also oddly motivating. Like, you're telling me I need to prioritize pig real estate if I want to survive in this fairy tale world.
Priorities. But yeah, it's that whole blend of humor, consequence, and surprisingly deep combat that really sets Raven's Watch apart. And speaking of deep, did you know this is made by the same team behind Curse of the Dead Gods?
Wait, seriously, the folks who basically wrote the book on atmospheric skill-based roguelikes?
The one and only.
Okay, that explains a lot.
Right. They definitely brought that expertise to Raven's Watch, but with, like, a bigger emphasis on co-op play this time around.
So while you can brave this whole fairy tale nightmare solo, it's probably more fun with friends.
Way more fun. Trust me on this one. The game really shines when you team up online.
Got it. Grab your coziest gaming headset and your most competitive pal because things are about to get interesting. But before we dive into all that co-op chaos, let's talk setting. What kind of world are we dropping into here?
Okay, so imagine, right, enchanted forests, straight out of a storybook, but with this dash of, like, gothic darkness. Then throw in some landscapes inspired by Arabian Nights, all rendered in this vibrant, comic book-inspired art style.
So basically, someone mashed up your childhood bookshelf and added some seriously cool lighting effects. I can dig it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because those maps are procedurally generated with, randomized loot drops and all that, no two runs through this whole twisted fairy tale world are ever going to be the same.
That's the beauty of a good roguelike, right? You
Yeah.
never know what to expect, except maybe for a healthy dose of adrenaline. And let's be honest, Probably a few rage quits along the way.
Oh, absolutely. Gotta embrace the chaos. But speaking of which, we should probably talk about some of the potential downsides too. Because while Ravenswatch has a lot to offer, well, there are a few things players should be aware of, especially this early on in the 1.0 release lifecycle.
Okay, so what's the catch? Every fairy tale's got to have its wicked stepmother, right?
Yeah.
What's lurking in the shadows of Ravenswatch?
Well, if we're talking about the biggest monster players have encountered so far, it's actually server issues based on the early feedback.
Ah, so it's the dreaded launch day lag beast. Didn't think we'd get away without that.
I know, right? Unfortunately, it wouldn't be a new online game without it. Seems like players are reporting like longer matchmaking times and just some general difficulty connecting with friends.
Yeah, nothing says fairy tale friendship like staring at a loading screen for an hour, right? But hey, at least it sounds like the devs are aware of the issue.
Oh, absolutely. They're already on the case. And honestly, knowing Pastec from their track record with Curse of the Dead Gods, they tend to be pretty responsive. So,
Well, that's always good to hear. So server woes aside, any other potential drawbacks that players should maybe like brace themselves for before they jump into the fairy tale fray, I mean?
yeah, so some players have mentioned the amount of content,
Hmm.
specifically when it comes to the maps and boss encounters.
So a bit of a we love it, but we want more of it kind of vibe.
Exactly. The hero diversity, the randomized elements,
Mm.
those definitely keep things fresh, at least for a while.
But for those players who really like live for this genre, they might be craving a bit more to sink their teeth into, at least until those content updates start rolling out.
Right, because
Yes.
for some players, conquering the same 3 maps 100 times, that's just the tutorial. You know.
Uh-huh, pretty much. So speaking of updates, any hints from the devs about what their plans are for expanding Ravenswatch? What's on the horizon?
Well, no detailed roadmap just yet, but
Yeah.
they have said that new heroes are coming, as well as additional features and probably some balancing tweaks too, the usual.
Okay, so new heroes to master, new baddies to bash, maybe even a few surprises thrown in for good measure. Sounds promising. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about what we do have in this 1.0 release, this whole 3-day slash cycle thing. That's really got my attention. It sounds like it adds a really interesting kind of like pressure to the whole gameplay loop.
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Because you're not just exploring those procedurally generated maps and, fighting enemies.
Mhm.
You're also on this constant time crunch.
It's like a fairy tale themed game show, but the grand prize is not getting eaten by a dragon. No pressure.
Exactly. Every decision kind of takes on more weight when you're on that time limit.
So many choices, so little time before the big bad wolf comes knocking, I guess.
Right. But, different folks, different fairy tale follies. Which brings us to difficulty settings.
Right, because not everyone wants to be stressing about a big bad clock while they're trying to loot a magical chest. Some folks just want to enjoy the scenery. So how does Ravenswatch handle that whole difficulty spectrum?
Well, they've got 4 different difficulty modes.
4. Okay, so whether you're a roguelike veteran who enjoys a little soul-crushing challenge,
Or you're just dipping your toes into the genre and want to, actually enjoy those pretty environments between monster encounters.
Ravenswatch has got you covered.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so all this talk about difficulty levels and like maximizing your time before the clock runs out, it's got me thinking about those supporter edition goodies. What are those all about? Fill me in.
Ah, yes. For anyone who wants to dive into Ravenswatch, with style, they've got a supporter edition that comes with some extras.
Like what? Give me the deets. Is there like a Slay in style starter pack I need to know about?
Okay, so you get 2 exclusive skin packs. One is all Raven themed, very
Yeah.
sleek, very cool. And then the other's more, nightmarish.
Ooh, tough choice. I do love a good spooky skin.
That's it.
But wait, there's more, right? Isn't there also like an art book? Because I'm all about those behind the scenes glimpses into the creative process.
There is a digital art book, yeah. It shows off all the character designs in the world. Really cool stuff.
Sold. Sign me up for the Art Book Appreciation Society. And while we're on the subject of aesthetics, that soundtrack, apparently it's something special.
Oh, yeah. It's great. They've got those haunting melodies that just, really set the mood, but then they also have those, high-energy combat tracks that just get you pumped during those intense boss fights.
Okay, yeah. I can already imagine myself getting totally immersed in that world, frantically battling like a gingerbread man with some epic orchestral music swelling in the background. It's going to be like a Disney movie directed by Guillermo del Toro. So for our listener out there, the one who's like on the fence about Ravenswatch, what would you say are the biggest reasons to jump in right now?
Well, if you like action RPGs, co-op gameplay, and, a unique setting with a dark sense of humor, Ravenswatch is definitely worth checking out.
It's like a dungeon crawler designed by the Brothers Grimm after a particularly wild night out, right? But what about those potential downsides? The server issues, the limited content. Should those be deal breakers for anyone, right? Those server hiccups and the limited content could be a deal breaker for some.
True, true. It's all about, weighing those against the game's strengths, right? And the
Yeah.
promise of all that future content.
Because the foundation is there, it sounds like.
Exactly. If you're willing to be patient, embrace those early access routes. I think Ravenswatch offers something pretty unique. It's a really enjoyable take on the roguelike genre, that's for sure.
And hey, maybe those server issues will be ancient history by the time you finish listening to this deep dive. Wouldn't that be something?
Fingers crossed. But yeah, in all seriousness, I think the big takeaway here is that Ravenswatch has a ton of potential.
It's got style, it's got action, it's got that delightfully twisted fairy tale thing going on.
Right. And it's got options. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Whether you're all about that co-op life or you're a lone wolf, no pun intended,
Haha, nice.
whether you want a real challenge or something a little more laid back, Ravenswatch lets you, carve your own path.
It's all about finding what clicks for you, which honestly is a good philosophy for like life in general, but we're getting philosophical now.
Right. Let's save that for another episode.
Exactly. So for our listener out there, the one who's been patiently absorbing all this Ravenswatch goodness, here's a final thought to chew on. If you could pluck any fairy tale or mythical figure, any at all, and drop them into Ravenswatch,
Ooh, okay, I like this.
who would it be? And what kind of crazy, twisted abilities would they have? Hit us up in the comments. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Now, that's a challenge worthy of a Ravenswatch hero.
Right. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Ravenswatch. Until next time, happy gaming.